The other
Shut your
passengers
mouth!
on the
You are
Greyhound
dead!
bus simply looked away. A drunk thug named Axel and his gang waved a heavy metal thermos in the
Recording. This is
face of
gonna
an
be
obese
perfect for
42-year-old
online.
father.
You and your dog need
Rex
to move
just
out of
sat
here right
there, his
now.
massive hands gripping his dog Toby's collar, enduring the humiliating insults. They thought he and his old German shepherd were scared. But what they didn't know was that this heavy-set man had once walked into the most dangerous enemy zones, fighting off 10 elite soldiers bare-handed to protect his squad. Most importantly, they didn't know why he refused to fight them. It wasn't because he was weak. It was because of a promise that made him never want to use his fists again. Before we uncover the explosive moment he finally snapped, where are you watching this video from? Leave your city in the comments below. It was 11:34 p.m. The midnight Greyhound bus hummed along the pitch-black road. The air conditioning was broken in the back half, leaving the cabin reeking of musty seat fabric and stale breath. Rex sat crammed in the corner, trying to make his large 280-pound frame as small as possible so he wouldn't bother anyone. At his feet, Toby shifted. The 8-year-old German shepherd let out a low, uneasy bark. The sound vibrated through the floorboards. Rex reached down. His thick fingers rubbed the scar on his right hand. Suddenly, the bus tires hit a rough patch of asphalt. The jolt threw a passenger in the row ahead against the window. "Keep that fat guy and his noisy dog quiet, will you?" the man muttered, loud enough for half the bus to hear. Rex didn't say a word. He just lowered his head. His massive hand unconsciously tightened around Toby's leather collar. He swallowed the insult, letting it burn in his throat. 5 years ago, things would have ended differently. After his wife passed away, Rex walked away from the Navy SEALs. He lost his anchor. Grief turned into a blind, reckless anger. He spent his nights picking fights in dive bars, trading blows with anyone who looked at him wrong. The discipline of the military faded, replaced by cheap alcohol and a heavy, neglected body. He became obese, hiding his lethal combat skills under layers of fat and a worn-out flannel shirt. The turning point came in a sterile hospital room. He had taken a bad hit during a pointless brawl. He woke up with a fractured rib and a swollen eye. Sitting next to the bed was his daughter, Jade. She was 11 at the time. She wasn't angry, she was just crying. Her small hands held his bruised fingers. Her voice trembled as she looked at his battered face. "Promise me, Dad, promise me you won't fight anymore." That single sentence hit him harder than any fist ever could. The former Tier 1 operator broke down. Right then and there, he made a choice. He locked the monster inside a cage and threw away the key. He chose to live for his daughter. To keep that promise, Rex accepted the cost. He let the world think he was weak. He let strangers mock his weight and his silence. He traded his pride for his daughter's peace of mind. Now, staring at the dirty floor of the bus, Rex took a slow breath. He just had to endure 6 more hours, 6 hours of silence, and he would be in Savannah, safe with Jade. But as the air brakes hissed and the bus began to slow down for an unscheduled stop, Rex had no idea. The cruelest test of his 5-year promise was waiting right outside the door. The hissing of the air brakes cut through the silence. The Greyhound pulled into a desolate, poorly lit rest stop somewhere near the state line. The doors hissed open, letting in a gust of humid night air. Then the nightmare boarded. A group of loud, rowdy young men stumbled up the steps. Leading the pack was Axel, a 22-year-old punk with a patchy beard and a leather jacket. The stench of cheap beer and stale cigarette smoke immediately flooded the cramped cabin. Axel held a heavy 40-ounce stainless steel Stanley thermos in one hand and a thick Maglite flashlight in the other. He swung them recklessly as he walked. "Move it, Grandpa!" Axel barked at an elderly man who was too slow to pull his legs out of the aisle. The heavy metal thermos slammed against the plastic armrests with a loud, rhythmic thud. Thud, thud, thud. The gang pushed their way down the narrow aisle, completely ignoring the discomfort of the tired passengers. At the front, the bus driver glanced at his rearview mirror. He opened his mouth to issue a warning about the safety rules. But seeing the aggressive gang and knowing he had a tight schedule, he closed his mouth, shook his head, and pressed the gas pedal. The bus merged back onto the pitch-black road. The doors were locked. The space was sealed. There was no escape for anyone inside. Axel loitered down the aisle, his bloodshot eyes scanning the rows for entertainment. He wanted a reaction. He wanted power. His gaze drifted past sleeping college students and terrified families. Then, his eyes locked onto the back corner. He saw a massive, overweight man huddled against the window with an old dog resting at his boots. Axel grinned. He had found his target. He stopped right in front of Rex's seat. He leaned in close, bringing the reek of alcohol right into Rex's personal space. "Well, look what we have here," Axel sneered. He used the heavy Stanley thermos to forcefully shove Rex's knee. "Taking up 2 seats, Shamu? Or did you just eat the passenger who was sitting next to you?" His gang erupted into cruel laughter. Around them, the dynamic of the bus instantly shifted. Some passengers squeezed their eyes shut, pretending to be deep asleep to avoid drawing Axel's attention. A few others peeked through their fingers, their eyes darting toward Rex, silently judging him. They wondered why this massive father wasn't standing up for himself. To them, his silence looked like pure cowardice. Rex didn't flinch. He bit down hard on his back teeth, keeping his head lowered. At his feet, Toby sensed the immediate threat, the German shepherd's ears pinned back. He bared his teeth, letting out a low warning growl to protect his owner. Instantly, Rex reached down. His thick fingers gently stroked the length of Toby's spine, calming the loyal dog. "Easy, boy, easy." Rex maintained his absolute silence. The contrast was striking. The loud, aggressive, chaotic punk standing over the massive, unmoving, silent father. But beneath the surface, a war was raging. While one of Rex's hands smoothly stroked Toby, his other hand was gripping his own thigh. His thick fingers dug into his faded blue jeans so intensely that his entire arm was shaking. The physical effort required to hold back his training was agonizing. But Rex's extraordinary patience didn't calm Axel down. Instead, it acted like a lit match thrown into a powder keg. Axel felt ignored. He felt disrespected. "Oh, the fat man is deaf too," Axel taunted. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his smartphone. He turned on the camera flash, the harsh white light blinding in the dark cabin, and shoved the lens inches from Rex's face. "Hey guys, check out this absolute unit of a loser. Can't even look me in the eye." Behind Axel, one of his younger gang members shifted uncomfortably. The boy pulled gently on Axel's leather jacket. "Hey, Axel, let it go," the kid muttered. "The old man isn't worth it. Let's just sit down." Axel's face twisted in fury. The hesitation from his own crew threatened his alpha status. He couldn't back down now. He had to prove he was in control. He violently shoved the kid's hand away and turned his full wrath back onto Rex. "Shut up," Axel snapped at his friend before leaning even closer to Rex. "You think you're better than me, fat ass? Look at the camera." Rex didn't look up. Instead, he shifted his massive 280-pound frame, deliberately placing his broad shoulders between Axel and Toby. He used his own body as a fleshy shield to protect the dog. Axel shoved Rex's shoulder. Once, twice, Rex absorbed the impacts like a sponge swallowing the humiliation. To the untrained eye, Rex looked like a terrified victim. But a seasoned combat veteran would have noticed something chilling. Rex's breathing was not erratic or panicked. It was unnaturally slow and rhythmic. In through the nose, out through the mouth. It was the tactical breathing of a Tier 1 operator actively managing an adrenaline dump, preparing his nervous system for a lethal strike. The punks laughed, thinking they were playing with a helpless, overweight prey. But what they didn't know was that a deep, vibrating rumble was starting to build inside the chest of the old German shepherd. Axel's cruel laughter bounced off the bus windows. But seeing the massive, 280-pound father continue to stare blankly at the floor, refusing to give them the angry reaction they craved, the gang quickly grew bored. There was no fun in tormenting a rock. "This guy's pathetic," Axel muttered, lowering his smartphone. He turned his attention away from Rex and scanned the seats for a more entertaining target. His bloodshot eyes landed on an elderly woman sitting across the aisle. She was shrinking into her seat, her trembling hands clutching a worn-out floral purse to her chest. She had been trying to make herself invisible since the gang boarded. "Hey, Grandma, what you got in there?" one of Axel's henchmen sneered. Before the old woman could react, the young punk reached out and violently snatched the purse from her fragile grip. "Stop, please, I need those," the elderly woman cried out, her voice cracking in pure terror. The thug carelessly unzipped the bag and dumped its contents onto the dirty floor. A cheap wallet, a pair of reading glasses, and several plastic prescription bottles tumbled out. The pill bottles hit the hard floorboards with a sharp, rattling clatter, rolling under the seats. The sheer injustice of the moment hung heavy in the stifling air. Rex sat completely still, his eyes closed, his jaw muscles locked so tightly they felt ready to snap. He was trying to block it out. He was trying to be the harmless father he promised to be. But Toby couldn't understand human promises. The 8-year-old German shepherd only understood loyalty and protection. Seeing the elderly woman in distress, Toby had seen enough. The dog suddenly lunged forward, breaking away from Rex's loose grip. Toby planted himself firmly in the narrow aisle, acting as a physical barrier between the terrified woman and the laughing thugs. The fur on his back stood up like coarse needles. Toby didn't just growl this time. He let out a ferocious, ear-splitting bark that echoed like a gunshot in the confined space of the bus. The raw, aggressive sound caught the thugs completely off guard. The henchman who had grabbed the purse yelped in surprise and stumbled backward, tripping over Axel's boots. The entire gang scrambled in panic, retreating a few steps from the snarling German shepherd. For a brief, satisfying moment, the bullies were exposed for the cowards they truly were. The tension in the cabin spiked, but it was quickly replaced by a fleeting sense of justice. In the back rows, a few brave passengers couldn't hold back. A suppressed chuckle slipped out, then a whisper. "Look at them running from an old dog," a college student muttered under his breath. The whisper was quiet, but in the tense silence that followed Toby's bark, it was loud enough. It reached Axel's ears. The 22-year-old leader froze. The grin vanished from his face, replaced by a dark, ugly, twisted grimace. His authority had been challenged. His gang had looked like fools on camera, scared off by an old dog belonging to a fat coward. Axel's bruised ego demanded blood. He couldn't just walk away now. He slowly turned his gaze back to Toby. His eyes were cold, filled with genuine malice. "You stupid mutt," Axel hissed, taking a slow step forward. Sensing the shift in the atmosphere, Rex immediately snapped into motion. He grabbed Toby's collar and forcefully hauled the heavy dog behind his massive legs, using his 280-pound body as a complete shield. Rex lowered his head entirely, staring at Axel's scuffed leather boots. He abandoned every ounce of his pride. He embraced the role of a pathetic, terrified victim. I'm so sorry," Rex pleaded, his voice intentionally soft and shaky. "He's just protective of people. Please, just let it go. We don't want any trouble." Rex was begging a drunk 22-year-old for mercy. The humiliation was absolute, but beneath the worn flannel shirt, Rex was fighting the hardest battle of his life. Thick beads of sweat rolled down his forehead, stinging his eyes. He wasn't sweating from fear. He was sweating from the immense, agonizing physical effort it took to keep the monster inside him chained. In the dark theater of his mind, a memory played on a continuous loop. The sterile hospital room, the steady beep of the heart monitor, and Jade's tear-streaked face. "Promise me, Dad. Promise me you won't fight anymore." Her voice was the only thing keeping his fists open. He just needed to endure, but Rex had made a critical miscalculation. He assumed he was dealing with rational bullies who would be satisfied with total submission. He underestimated the bottomless cruelty of an arrogant man trying to save face. Rex's begging didn't appease Axel, it emboldened him. It gave him the green light to take his power trip to the absolute limit. "Oh, you don't want trouble?" Axel mocked, stepping within an inch of Rex. He raised his smartphone, making sure the camera was perfectly framing the scene. "Too bad. This mutt needs to learn some manners." Without another word, Axel raised the heavy 40-ounce stainless steel Stanley thermos high up above his head. The metal gleamed under the dim cabin lights. "Let's see if he can bark with a cracked skull," Axel growled into the camera. With all his drunken strength, Axel swung the heavy metal thermos down, aiming directly for the top of Toby's head. In that split second, time slowed down for Rex. The physics of the moment were simple. The swing would only take 0.5 seconds to connect. A direct hit with that much weight would easily crush the old dog's skull. The promise to his daughter was sacred. It had defined the last 5 years of his life. But in that exact moment, Rex realized something profound. Non-violence was a privilege you could only afford when the innocent weren't about to die. The chain holding the monster snapped. Around them, several passengers gasped. The elderly woman covered her face with her trembling hands. Everyone squeezed their eyes shut, bracing for the sickening crunch of bone and the tragic yelp of the dying dog. But the sound that followed wasn't a yelp. It was a sharp, explosive crack of flesh meeting flesh, a sound so violent it made the air pressure in the bus drop. When the passengers slowly opened their eyes, the sight before them made Axel's blood run cold. The sickening crack echoed through the bus, but it didn't come from the German shepherd's skull. When the terrified passengers opened their eyes, they gasped at the impossible sight. The heavy metal Stanley thermos was stopped completely in mid-air, inches from Toby's head. Holding Axel's wrist in a vice-like grip was Rex's massive scarred hand. It had happened in a blur. The seemingly slow, lethargic, overweight father had moved with a speed that defied logic. Axel's bloodshot eyes widened in shock. He grunted and tried to yank his arm back, putting his entire body weight into it. Nothing happened. The chubby, worn-out hand holding his wrist felt like an industrial hydraulic press. It didn't budge a single millimeter. Suddenly, the power dynamic in the cramped cabin flipped upside down. The apex predator realized with a sinking stomach that he had just cornered an unbreakable stone wall. Very slowly, Rex stood up. As his massive 280-pound frame uncoiled from the cramped seat, he seemed to grow twice in size. He naturally shifted into a flawless, textbook combat stance, 1 foot slightly forward, knees bent, perfectly balanced. The cowardly facade shattered into a million pieces right in front of the flashing smartphone camera. Crack, it was a soft sound, but everyone heard it. The bones in Axel's wrist were starting to grind under the immense crushing pressure of Rex's grip. Axel's survival instincts finally kicked in, screaming at him to run. But it was far too late. Panic and pain clouded the punk's judgment. With a furious roar, Axel swung his free hand, throwing a wild, desperate punch aimed squarely at Rex's jaw. "Promise me you won't fight anymore," the promise echoed. A punch for a punch was a fight, but subduing an active threat, that was just crowd control. Rex didn't even blink. He didn't throw a counterpunch. He didn't need to. In the narrow, restrictive space of the bus aisle, a street brawler throws wild haymakers, but a Tier 1 operator uses physics. With a fluid, minimalist motion, Rex parried Axel's flying fist. In the exact same millisecond, he stepped forward, closing the distance. Rex executed a flawless CQC wrist lock. He twisted Axel's trapped arm sharply behind the punk's own back, locking the shoulder joint in a painful C-clamp. Using his overwhelming weight and leverage, Rex forcefully drove Axel down. The heavy Stanley thermos slipped from Axel's numb fingers and rolled uselessly under a seat. A split second later, Axel's face smashed against the dirty rubber floor of the bus aisle. Rex followed him down, driving his heavy knee precisely into the pressure point at the base of Axel's spine, pinning him to the floorboards. The entire sequence from Axel's desperate punch to him eating dirt on the floor took less than 2 seconds. The arrogant gang leader, who had been loudly terrorizing the bus moments ago, was now whimpering in excruciating agony, his face pressed against a discarded gum wrapper. But the danger wasn't over. Seeing their leader humiliated and crushed in the blink of an eye, Axel's 2 henchmen panicked. Pure adrenaline overrode their common sense. One pulled the heavy Maglite flashlight from his pocket. The other, the young kid, frantically reached into his jeans and produced a switchblade. The metallic snick of the blade deploying sounded loud in the stunned silence of the bus. They took a hesitant step forward, raising their weapons. Rex didn't flinch. Keeping his knee firmly planted on Axel's spine, the former Navy SEAL slowly lifted his head. He didn't yell. He didn't look angry, and that was the most terrifying part. Rex looked at the 2 young thugs with a cold, hollow, completely emotionless stare. It was the dead-eyed gaze of a man who had walked through the valley of the shadow of death. A man who had seen and delivered violence on a scale these street punks couldn't even comprehend. It was pure, unadulterated killer instinct. The suffocating aura radiating from the massive father hit the 2 boys like a physical wall. The kid holding the switchblade froze. His hand began to tremble violently. His rapid, panicked breathing contrasted sharply with Rex's slow, controlled, tactical exhales. "I made a promise that I wouldn't hit anyone," Rex said. His voice was a low, gravelly baritone that cut clearly through the silence. "Don't make me break your bones. Drop the weapons." Now, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The absolute certainty in his tone was enough. The kid swallowed hard, his eyes wide with genuine terror. His trembling fingers opened. Clack! The switchblade hit the floor grate. A second later, the heavy Maglite followed. Both thugs immediately raised their empty hands in the air, surrendering completely to the overwhelming dominance of the silent father. The physical conflict was resolved. Not a single punch had been thrown by Rex. Not a single drop of blood had been spilled. The passengers let out a collective breath of relief. But just as Rex eased the pressure on Axel's spine, a new blinding light pierced through the bus windows. Red and blue flashes illuminated the dark cabin. The ear-piercing wail of a police siren drowned out the hum of the engine. The bus driver had silently flagged down a highway patrol cruiser miles ago, and now they were being pulled over. Rex looked out the window at the flashing lights. He had kept his promise. But to a cop walking onto a bus, all they would see was a massive man pinning a bleeding kid to the floor. The real trouble had just begun. The agonizing wail of the sirens grew deafening. As soon as the Greyhound bus hit an exit ramp and cleared the pitch-black road, the driver slammed on the brakes. The massive vehicle lurched onto the shoulder of a brightly lit intersection, throwing everyone forward in their seats. Outside, 2 highway patrol cruisers boxed the bus in, their heavy tires screeching against the asphalt. Red and blue lights strobed violently through the cabin windows, painting the terrified faces of the passengers in alternating colors. "Open the doors," a stern voice commanded from outside. With a hiss of hydraulics, the doors swung open. 2 tall, broad-shouldered police officers stormed up the steps. Their tactical flashlights cut through the dim cabin. Their hands were firmly resting on the grips of their holstered firearms. They had received a frantic call from dispatch about a violent riot on a midnight bus, and their adrenaline was already spiking. The chaotic scene before them instantly fooled their trained eyes. From their perspective at the front of the aisle, the narrative seemed obvious. A massive, fierce-looking, 280-pound man was aggressively kneeling on the spine of a bleeding, whimpering 22-year-old kid. Axel's 2 henchmen immediately recognized their golden opportunity. They dropped the tough guy act and instantly played the victims. "Help us, please," the young kid with the switchblade screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Rex. "This crazy guy just snapped. He attacked my friend for no reason. He's trying to kill him." The officers didn't hesitate. Survival instinct and protocol took over. "Police, don't move. Let him go and put your hands in the air." The lead officer barked, drawing his service weapon and aiming the barrel squarely at Rex's broad chest. "Do it now, or I will shoot." The tension in the bus reached a suffocating breaking point. A single misunderstanding, a single sudden movement, and Rex would be shot dead. Even if he survived, an assault charge against 3 young men would guarantee a prison sentence. And a prison sentence meant he would lose custody of Jade forever. The promise he had sacrificed everything for was hanging by a frayed thread. Rex didn't panic. He didn't try to explain himself over the shouting. He relied on decades of ingrained military discipline. Moving with deliberate, exaggerated slowness, Rex lifted his heavy knee off Axel's spine. He stood up smoothly, keeping his hands entirely visible at all times. He raised his arms exactly to shoulder height. He bent his elbows at a perfect 90-degree angle, turning his palms completely flat and facing forward, the universal textbook military gesture of total non-combat compliance. At his boots, Toby didn't bark. The 8-year-old German Shepherd demonstrated the flawless discipline of a military working dog. Sensing his handler's absolute stillness, Toby simply backed up and sat quietly against Rex's leg, watching the officers with alert, silent eyes. "Turn around, slowly. Get on your knees," the officer commanded, keeping his gun raised. Rex obeyed. Without a word of protest, he lowered his massive frame to the dirty rubber floor. The officer quickly stepped forward, roughly grabbed Rex's arms, and pulled them behind his back. The cold, heavy steel of the handcuffs clicked loudly, biting sharply into the thick scars on Rex's thick wrists. Meanwhile, the second officer helped Axel up from the floor. The punk's nose was bleeding heavily from hitting the floorboards, and he was cradling his painfully twisted shoulder. But despite the pain, Axel was an experienced street rat. He immediately realized the golden opportunity handed to him, and a victorious smirk spread across his bruised face. He decided to play the ultimate victim card. "Officer, thank God you guys showed up," Axel stammered, artificially raising the pitch of his voice to sound terrified. He pointed a shaking finger at Rex. "That guy is a total psycho. My friends and I were just trying to find our seats and I accidentally bumped into his dog. I apologized, I swear, but he just snapped." The young henchman with the switchblade chimed in immediately, flawlessly corroborating the lie. "Yeah, he started screaming crazy military stuff, saying he was going to kill us all." He grabbed Axel and slammed him into the floor for no reason. The lead officer, still pumped with adrenaline, turned his stern gaze back down to Rex. The massive father was still kneeling on the dirty floor, the cold steel handcuffs biting sharply into the thick scars on his wrists. "Is this true?" the officer demanded harshly. "Did you attack this young man?" Rex remained completely silent, his jaw muscles locked tight. He stared blankly at the officer's boots. Decades of military discipline had taught him that trying to argue with a hysterical, lying civilian in front of an amped-up cop was a losing battle. But to the officer, Rex's stoic silence looked exactly like the sullen guilt of a violent offender. "Listen to me, buddy," the officer growled, leaning down so he was face to face with Rex. You're looking at multiple serious felony charges here. Aggravated assault, battery, maybe even attempted murder, depending on what the DA decides. You're going away for a very long time. The officer's words hit Rex like a physical blow. The physical pain of the tight handcuffs was nothing compared to the psychological terror that suddenly gripped his heart. A long time. If he went to prison, who would take care of Jade? Child Protective Services would be called immediately. She would be placed in the foster system before the sun even came up. The promise he had sacrificed everything for over the last 5 years was being ripped away from him because of a drunk teenager's lie. Rex closed his eyes. A single bead of sweat rolled down his scarred cheek. He was completely trapped. Stand him up and read him his rights, the lead officer commanded his partner. Let's get him out of here. The heavy steel handcuffs tightened around Rex's wrists as he was roughly pulled to his feet, seemingly sealing his tragic fate. But this suffocating injustice wouldn't last much longer. Officers, a raspy, gravelly voice echoed from the back row. You might want to pause for a second. An elderly man who had been sitting quietly in the very last row the entire trip slowly stood up. He leaned heavily on a wooden cane. As he stepped out into the aisle, the flashing police lights caught the faded bronze eagle, globe, and anchor pin, the emblem of the United States Marine Corps, pinned to his worn-out baseball cap. The old Marine didn't look at the cops first. He looked down at Rex, who was still kneeling silently in handcuffs. You were in the teams, weren't you, son? The old veteran asked softly. That C-clamp joint lock, you don't learn that in a street fight. Rex didn't speak. He just gave the old man a slow, subtle nod. The lead officer frowned, his hand lowering slightly from his holster. Sir, please return to your seat. We have the suspect in custody. You have a father in custody, the veteran corrected him, his voice firm and unyielding. He raised his wooden cane and pointed it directly at the floor near Axel's feet. If you want the suspect, I suggest you look at that. The officer followed the cane's direction. Lying face up on the rubber mat, partially hidden under a seat, was Axel's smartphone. The screen was still glowing. The camera was still recording. Frowning, the officer picked up the device. He stopped the recording and tapped the playback button. For the next 5 minutes, the only sound in the dead-silent bus was the tinny audio playing from the smartphone speaker. The officers watched the undeniable truth unfold in high definition. They saw Axel aggressively body-shaming the silent father. They saw Rex desperately trying to de-escalate the situation, pulling his dog back and begging for peace. And finally, they saw the damning evidence: Axel raising the heavy metal thermos to crush the dog's skull, followed by the blindingly fast, completely non-lethal defensive maneuver by Rex. The dynamic on the bus shifted 180 degrees. The lead officer locked the phone screen and looked up. His eyes, previously filled with adrenaline and suspicion, now burned with absolute disgust as they locked onto Axel. Axel's victorious smirk vanished instantly. The color drained from his face. Hey, wait, you don't understand. Turn around. The officer snapped, grabbing Axel by his leather jacket and aggressively spinning him around. You're under arrest for aggravated assault, animal cruelty, and public intoxication. The click of handcuffs securing Axel's wrists sounded entirely different than Rex's. It sounded like justice. The second officer quickly rounded up the 2 trembling henchmen, confiscating the switchblade and the maglite as hard evidence. Get moving, the officers growled, shoving the 3 humiliated punks down the steps and out into the cold night air. As the bullies were led away to the cruisers, the lead officer knelt next to Rex. With a metallic clack, the handcuffs were unlocked and removed. I apologize, sir, the officer said quietly, helping the massive man to his feet. Thank you for your restraint. If you hadn't stopped him, we'd be dealing with a much worse crime scene tonight. Rex simply nodded, rubbing his bruised wrists. Outside, the police sirens wailed as the cruisers pulled away, taking the human garbage with them. The flashing red and blue lights faded into the darkness. As the bus driver closed the doors and shifted the heavy vehicle back into gear, a profound silence settled over the cabin. It wasn't the tense, fearful silence from before. It was a silence colored by absolute respect and unspoken gratitude for the massive, silent father who had chosen to be a shield instead of a sword. The rest of the journey passed without incident. As the first rays of golden morning sunlight crested over the horizon, the Greyhound bus finally pulled into the Savannah Transit Station. Rex stepped off the bus, the cool morning breeze washing over his tired face. Toby trotted happily by his side. Despite the victorious outcome of the night, a heavy weight sat on Rex's chest. He had broken the promise, he had used violence. Standing on the concrete platform, holding a worn-out backpack, was his 16-year-old daughter, Jade. Seeing her father, Jade's face lit up and she ran toward him. But Rex stopped. He looked down at his bruised, scarred hands, unable to meet her eyes. "I'm sorry, sweetie," Rex mumbled, his voice thick with guilt. "I broke the promise. I fought someone tonight. I couldn't hold it back." Before Jade could respond, a fragile voice called out from behind them. "Excuse me. Wait." The elderly woman from the bus hurried over as fast as her old legs could carry her. She reached into her floral purse and pulled out a small foil-wrapped box of homemade cookies. She gently pressed it into Jade's hands. "Your father saved my life tonight, sweetheart," the old woman said, tears welling in her eyes. "There were some very bad men on that bus. We were all so scared. But your father, he stepped in. He didn't let them hurt us. He is a true hero." Other passengers walking past the platform nodded in agreement, giving Rex warm, respectful smiles. Even the bus driver gave a sharp two-finger salute before driving away. Jade looked at the box of cookies, then at the grateful faces of the strangers. She turned back to her massive, intimidating father, who was still looking at the ground like a guilty child. A gentle smile spread across Jade's face. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around Rex's big belly. "I know you fought, Dad," Jade whispered softly, resting her head against his chest. "But I'm not disappointed. I'm so proud of you. You didn't use your fists because you were angry or looking for trouble. You used them to protect the elderly and punish the bad guys. That's the hero I always knew you were." For the first time in 5 years, the heavy burden of the past finally lifted from Rex's shoulders. The monster inside him wasn't a curse anymore. It was a shield for the innocent. Rex finally looked up, a bright, genuine smile breaking across his scarred face. He hugged his daughter back, tighter than ever before. Together, with the old German shepherd leading the way, the father and daughter walked away from the station, bathed in the warm, healing light of the Savannah morning. The story of Rex and the midnight bus is a powerful reminder that things are rarely what they seem on the surface. In a world that constantly equates loudness with power and silence with weakness, we often misjudge the quietest people in the room. The arrogant young punk Axel believed that true strength was about intimidation. He thought that by flexing his muscles, shouting the loudest, and swinging a heavy metal thermos, he was proving his dominance. He mistook Rex's silence for cowardice and his patience for submission. But as the events on that bus proved, true strength has nothing to do with how loud you can yell or how much pain you can inflict on others. True strength, the kind of strength that earns absolute respect, is about restraint. It is the agonizing, invisible battle of controlling the monster inside you. 5 years ago, Rex's fists were fueled by selfish anger and uncontrolled grief, resulting in a bloody brawl in a hospital waiting room that terrified his own daughter. That was destructive violence. But on the bus, Rex endured the ultimate humiliation. He swallowed his pride, took physical abuse, and even dropped to his knees to beg a drunk teenager for mercy. He did all of that not because he was weak, but because his love for his daughter and his commitment to his promise were stronger than his ego. When the chain finally snapped, he didn't unleash the monster out of wounded pride. He unleashed it only when innocent lives were inches away from tragedy. And even then, the Tier 1 operator didn't throw a single punch. He used a calculated, non-lethal joint lock to subdue the threat, protecting the passengers without shedding a single drop of blood. That is the fundamental difference between a bully and a warrior. A bully uses violence to feed their ego. A warrior uses controlled force to serve as a shield for the defenseless. Sometimes, the most dangerous man in the room is not the one beating his chest. It's the quiet, overweight father who is desperately trying to be harmless. We all face our own versions of Axel in life, people who push our buttons, disrespect us, and try to drag us down to their level. The question is, how do we respond? Do we let our egos take the wheel, or do we have the immense strength to stay silent until our actions are truly needed? If you were Rex sitting on that midnight bus, could you have held your temper for that long against those drunken bullies? What would you have done when they started harassing the elderly woman? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story of redemption and true strength inspiring, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It helps us continue bringing you incredible stories like this one every single week. Stay strong, stay patient, and we will see you in the next video.